What is up, guys? Welcome back to CageChat MMA, and we are here for the top 5 UFC fights of 2021. Of course, we're into a new year, which means a whole new landscape. Of course, we had the narrative of 2020, but I think there's 5 fights that personally I would very much like to see in the UFC this year. Of course, in 2020 we didn't have any fans for the majority of the fights, obviously since May 18th at UFC 249. So it'd be nice. One, I'd imagine the UFC would like to get some revenue back with fans, whether obviously that's not going to be within the next 2-3 months. Whether Fight Island has a limited capacity, I'm not sure yet. I don't know if that's been publicly announced, or whether we're going to have fans in the States. Obviously, Ryan Garcia and Luke Campbell last night had fans in Texas. Obviously, we've got the UFC Apex, obviously over in Nevada, in Las Vegas, of course. So it's going to be interesting to see how the UFC look to make their money back. Obviously, the pay-per-view price seems to have gone up, and they are stacking the pay-per-views a lot more recently in 2020. You know, the fight night cards are decent, but their star talent, the majority of it, are on the pay-per-views, so they can recoup some of that money that they would have lost from the gates throughout 2020. So yes, firstly, make sure to hit that subscribe button, make sure to hit a like on this video as well, and of course we'll move on to the first one. And this one is a bit out of the ballpark, I think. It's Nate Diaz versus Tony Ferguson, or you could flip it the other way around. I'm not quite sure who'd be in the red corner, probably Tony Ferguson. And for me, both fighters unfortunately are coming to the end of their career. Both of them have incredible fan bases, and both of them are incredible fighters that will go down probably into the UFC Hall of Fame. But I feel for Tony Ferguson. He didn't have the greatest 2020. He got 2 very bad beatings. He got 2 very bad losses. Obviously, first one was supposed to be for the interim lightweight title. That was going to be, setting up hopefully the Khabib fight for a 6th time. He was supposed to be fighting Khabib, of course, back in April. Didn't work out due to the pandemic, of course. And then he fought Charles Oliveira, who put a beating on him for 3 rounds. And I do feel sorry for Tony Ferguson. I feel mentally he's still very much in the game, but I think his body now, at least he looks in terrific shape. But of course, he's taken a lot of beatings down the years. We saw the pictures of him, Anthony Pettis, Donald Cerrone, all of his opponents bleeding a lot. But we forget sometimes how much damage he takes in the octagon, albeit he might not get cut as much. But he still takes a lot of strikes. And I think Max Holloway is very much in the same category as someone who gets the wins, but he might take 50, 75 strikes during the fight, and over a 5-6 year period of fighting 3 times a year, those strikes add up, albeit you might not see it in visible damages as cuts or knockouts. Similarly, Nate Diaz, he took a beating against Jorge Masvidal. With all due respect, he looked good against Anthony Pettis in his return. But I think these two, you could do it at 155, 170, and I think it mixes it up as well. I say at 170 just because I don't want to see Tony Ferguson, have to cut down to 155 for a fight that isn't too impactful on the lightweight division. This one's more of a fun fight, more of a legacy fight for the two, because I think we do need more of them in the UFC. We had it with obviously Masvidal Diaz for the BMF title, and obviously Conor and Nate's 2 fights are also fights that weren't huge on that division at the time, albeit it could have turned out that way with Conor obviously becoming the champ at Eddie Alvarez. So for me, I mean, if you did it at 155, then Nate Diaz has got to win. He's put himself into the top 5 of the lightweights immediately. And if you're the UFC, that's very tasteful for the monetary side of it, obviously. Because could you imagine, Conor beats Poirier, we get Nate Diaz versus Conor 3 for the lightweight title, perhaps. That would be a great way for the trilogy to conclude. One of those become the lightweight title. You probably have to say it, you probably have to edge it to the UFC, albeit they're impartial. You'd want Conor McGregor make it 2-1 in the trilogy, and obviously carry on that lightweight title for 2 and 3 years left, because he hasn't got that long left. He's 33 this year, which you almost forget. You always, I think because he took so much time off, you still think he's 29 to 30, and we still remember the McGregor that put the beating on Alvarez and beat Aldo in 13 seconds. But he's aged quite a bit. He's 33. But yes, back to these two. Nate Diaz versus Tony Ferguson is a fight I'd be very interested to see. It would be an incredible one to see on the ground. Both jiu-jitsu specialists. Obviously, got 10th Planet versus the camp of Nate Diaz, of course. And yeah, I think that's a fight that we should see in 2021. But again, I don't think we will see it. I don't know how much Nate Diaz wants to fight, and obviously he's looking for fights that are going to give him good paycheck, whether that's Masvidal or Conor. But I think Tony Ferguson would bring a good paycheck as well. Both of them have got incredibly, loyal fan bases, and both of them are incredible when it comes to selling a fight. So I wouldn't see any problems why this wouldn't be a good fight on the statistics side of it, as well as the sports side of it. So yes, Nate Diaz versus Tony Ferguson is the first fight that we come up here. And that moves on nicely to Zhang Weili versus Valentina Shevchenko. Of course, the strawweight champ versus the flyweight champ. Now, many want Shevchenko to challenge Nunes for the bantamweight title. Of course, Nunes doesn't really have too many challenges right now. She's more or less cleaned out the division, and we're still waiting for that division almost to get their young blood. And some fighters like Aspen Ladd, who was penned in for the title challenge, almost lost to Jermaine Durandame. So we're looking for those to get back into the limelight and become, with all due respect, worthy of that title challenge. Because at the moment, I think Amanda Nunes is a heavy favourite going into any fight that she goes into, whether it is a bantamweight or featherweight. But she takes on the flyweight champion. It's a trilogy we've seen. She has got 2 wins, Nunes, over Valentina Shevchenko, albeit one very close, and one that many thought that Valentina Shevchenko should have won, and therefore be 1-1 going into the trilogy, to conclude the saga. But Zhang Weili, for me, you're looking at a strawweight division as well. You're looking at Ioni and Jacek, who doesn't want to fight without fans. You're looking at Rose Namajunas, who's allegedly turned down the title opportunity, which I don't think she has. I think there's probably some miscommunication there between Dana White and Rose Namajunas, similarly to how there is between Dana White and Robert Whittaker. They're almost saying, I'll take the title chance, but they're not going to turn down a non-title fight as well. Maybe if it's a Paulo Costa in terms of Robert Whittaker's sort of fault. And of course, in Rose Namajunas, there is Ioni and Jacek. There's she beat Jessica Andrade in a rematch, of course. And obviously, there's Tatiana Suarez. Maybe you do Tatiana Suarez, Rose. We build Zhang Weili versus Valentina Shevchenko. Similarly, in the flyweight division, obviously got Jessica Andrade, who recently announced herself in that division. But again, there's not too many challenges once you look beyond that. She's beat Jennifer Maia, she's beat Katlyn Chookagian, she's beaten, Jessica Eye. She was penciled in for Joanne Calderwood before the injury, of course. That's a fight I'd still like to see just because of the Scottish aspect of it. But again, Zhang versus Shevchenko would be a super fight for me. I'd put Zhang up to 125. I don't know if Shevchenko could cut down to 115. I wouldn't like to see her cut down to 115 either. But yes, the power and the speed of Zhang, and the accuracy, and again the power, the speed, and the footwork of Valentina would put on a spectacle of the fight. Now, many thought Ioni and Jacek and Zhang Weili was the greatest women's fight of all time. I think these two, step into the octagon together and it goes 5 rounds. I think these two could be comparable with a fight like that as well. Obviously, we saw what Ioni and Jacek and Valentina Shevchenko was like, albeit those two had a past in Muay Thai as well, so those two had already crossed paths many times. But yes, Valentina Shevchenko versus Zhang Weili would be a fight I'd like to see in 2021. Whether they do it in China, maybe, whether it be in the States, or that's more likely maybe a Fight Island fight if we're continuing to go down that route with 0 fans at the moment going into 2021. But yes, I'd like to see the strawweight versus flyweight champion. Obviously, huge shout out to Yang Xiaonan as well, thinking that in China, if you had a title fight, it'd probably be Zhang Weili versus Yang Xiaonan, who, took the world by surprise, the UFC world at least by surprise in 2020, and became a true title contender. Obviously, you got Amanda Ribas and the names like that. Carla Esparza are also on the list, but you got Amanda Ribas who's still coming up. Mackenzie Dern still coming up. Give them a couple fights. Give them till maybe the end of 2021 before we're looking at those as true title contenders. Now, my third fight is one that I think everyone has as a dream fight. It's third because it is Khabib versus GSP, and I put it third because I don't know where Khabib's future lies. He said he's retired, and I believe he is retired. He's not done a Henry Cejudo or a Conor McGregor. He's gone, right, I'm done because you've not given me this, that, or you've not paid me enough in my last contract. I want more money, or the fights you're offering me aren't in line with where I want to be fighting. I think Khabib is done, but I think there's also 10% of us, and I think it is with any fighter, isn't it? There's always 10% there. Same with GSP. He said he's done, but I still think there's 10% in both of them that would thrive at the opportunity. And I think it works both with title and without title. I think this is a legacy fight, similarly to Nate Diaz, Tony Ferguson. Obviously, you got undefeated versus probably on resume the GOAT, the undefeated GOAT versus maybe resume GOAT, you could say, in terms of GSP, because I do think he is a great sort of time. I think it's him, Jon Jones, Anderson Silva, and Khabib now. I think Demetrius Johnson's also there in 5th place, but I think Khabib, obviously being 29-0, I think he has to be put in that the elite tier of the greatest of all time conversation. And he's done it all clean, albeit you could say his resume up to the UFC isn't as good, and you could say maybe up until he fought Conor, his resume wasn't as great, but he still got wins in there over Michael Johnson, and he's beaten Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje. Unfortunately, we didn't see Tony Ferguson, which was probably the pound for pound fight that we wanted to see for Khabib. But again, Khabib versus GSP, we saw the BMF title on the line. Do you make the greatest of all time belt? Maybe you do that and you go 30-0 versus GSP, who's a 2-weight champion at both welterweight and middleweight. You do it at 165, 170 perhaps. Although that probably favors GSP. 165 would be a good one because it would be the inaugural 165-pound champion, of course, if you wanted to go down that route. But again, I think we're seeing an age GSP, and we don't want to see GSP is almost like Anderson Silva. You're looking at his resume now, his legacy, and you've got so many losses on there. Every time it almost dampens what we thought of Anderson Silva, and we don't want to see GSP at 41, 42 coming out and going and looking half the GSP as we remember as a welterweight champion. Even against Michael Bisping, he was phenomenal. So it'd be interesting to see what is that. We don't want to ruin that aspect of the legacy of GSP, and same with Khabib. You're tempted in fate if you're going, I want to go to 30-0, you retire at 29-0, come back to that fight, and I think the MMA gods and the way they are more likely to be 29-1 than 30-0. But again, Khabib versus GSP in Abu Dhabi, you'd probably make it as well. That is a fight that's going to sell out. If we do it in September, when Khabib usually fights, that gives GSP enough time as well to cut down maybe to 155, 165. I know he's done test cuts as well, but again, to get in a proper camp, I think that would be a tremendous fight. But again, I don't see these two coming back anytime soon. Obviously, there's going to be talks in a couple of weeks, maybe in this week, between Khabib and Dana White to see what the future of the division lies. There's many thinking that Poirier and McGregor 2 is going to be for the lightweight title. So again, this is why this is the third on the list. Otherwise, they'll probably be the most wanted fight. But that moves us on nicely to number 2, and it's McGregor versus Masvidal. I think this is the money fight in the UFC at the moment. It was originally Nate Diaz versus McGregor 3, and I think that fight does still make a lot of money. But I think McGregor Masvidal is the money fight to make. And if we can get that in the full crowd, whether it's in Dublin, get 80, 90,000 in the Aretha Stadium or Croke Park, or you do it in the States in probably the Raiders Stadium we're looking at now, and you get 100,000 people in there if it's safe and we're allowed to do so. But you got McGregor Masvidal, BMF champion versus the first ever champ. You put the BMF title on the line. I know McGregor came out and said he wanted that belt once it got announced and given to Masvidal. Of course, you go back to UFC 206 when McGregor called out Jorge Masvidal in his bleeding house coat, and there's money to be made there. And if the UFC want to capitalize on what they missed in 2020, booking this fight makes sense between McGregor and Masvidal, especially if we're allowed crowds. If it's without crowds, then obviously you're not going to get the investment. You'll probably get 2 million, 3 million pay-per-view buys, but it's not going to do the same as the buzz you get with a Conor McGregor crowd and a Jorge Masvidal sort of build up to a fight. I think 2020 hasn't been kind to Jorge Masvidal due to his own sort of tweets and whatnot, and we're not going to get into his political style, but he became probably the most liked, the most hated inside 6 or 7 months with his backing of Donald Trump, and he became a dislikable figure. Now whether he can fix that with McGregor, or McGregor comes into that fight maybe as the face and Masvidal as the heel, I think if you'd done it 12 months ago, it would have been the opposite way around. I think Masvidal would have gone in as the face and McGregor more at the heel because of the way his character was being portrayed at that time. But McGregor's done a lot of good in 2020. He's done a lot bad as well. But a lot of the charity work you've seen done, a lot of the going up against the political stance in Ireland, especially at the start of the lockdowns at least, he was doing terrific work, and I think he's almost redeemed himself. He's had a good year, and he looks in tremendous shape going into the Poirier fight. He looks very calculated and ready and focused, I think is the main word I was looking for there. But yes, McGregor versus Masvidal was a fight for me to make, put the BMF title on the line. Let's sell it out at Croke Park or the Raiders Stadium, and let's make the UFC a lot of money, because they've missed out a lot of gate, and I think they're going to be looking to that this year, making a few money fights. We've seen obviously Jan Blachowicz and Adesanya made as well. And that moves us on nicely to the final fight, of course, which is a fight we probably should have seen this year. We didn't, and it's Jon Jones versus Francis Ngannou. Now, Jon Jones vacated the light heavyweight title, of course, back in September. Jan Blachowicz picked it up, of course, and Jon Jones is putting his journey in now up to the heavyweight division. He's looking in tremendous shape. Whether he's going to come in at 230, 240 in that division, I'm not sure. He said he's 240 at least the last time I saw on an Instagram post when he did a weight check-in. But, this fight was meant to be happening last year. Obviously, those two went back and forth on social media, and we thought it was going to be getting the fight. Obviously, Stipe Miocic has to defend the title against Francis Ngannou first. I think that is a must. Obviously, Stipe Miocic is still a champion. There's some obstacles to go to this fight, but I think when we do get Jones versus Ngannou, I think it will be for the heavyweight title. It's hard to book Jones against anything other than a heavyweight title, so whether he faces Stipe first, but I think that would be a robbery, and I think that would be a disservice to what Francis Ngannou has done, especially, he only spent, 20 or 30 seconds in the octagon this year against Rosenstruck. But, whichever way we go around this, I think Jon Jones versus Francis Ngannou, someone walks in there with the heavyweight title wrapped around their waist, and obviously one of them will walk out there. And it'll be an interesting litmus test for Jon Jones, maybe the most skillful fighter we've ever seen against maybe the most powerful fighter we've ever seen in Francis Ngannou, who just seems to knock guys down for fun inside 30, 40 seconds. So yeah, I would like to see that fight, but obviously we've got to see where Stipe is at as well. Obviously had the trilogy fight with Daniel Cormier, picked up a few injuries there, and he's only fought once a year for the last 3 years, I believe. Since they've been going back and forth in that trilogy. Obviously he fought Ngannou before Daniel Cormier, the first fight at least, and he put a beating on Francis Ngannou over 5 rounds, ones that we weren't many expecting. But obviously Francis Ngannou's come back from that. After that, Derek Lewis fight, he's been on an absolute tear. His ground and pound looks phenomenal. He looks like a changed fighter. He looks in much better shape as well. He still looks very raw against Overeem. He became a superstar with that knockout against Overeem, but he still looked very raw going to the Miocic fight, whereas Miocic was still someone, not a veteran, but he was still someone who had established themselves in the heavyweight division. Now it's Jon Jones' turn to establish himself there as well. Now whether you see him against Curtis Blades, Derek Lewis, I think that's down the line, but he has to be the heavyweight champion. You can't put a name like Jon Jones and a fighter like Jon Jones in a non-title fight for his heavyweight debut. It has to be for that belt, and it's just whether he comes in at 230, 240. So yes, Jon Jones versus Francis Ngannou is my number one pick for fight of 2021, and it's just how we get there. Whether we get Jones and Miocic, in March, say, and we get Ngannou Jones July, maybe, because Ngannou's gonna be fresh at least, or you get it in August, September, maybe October. If we're back in MSG, book it for November. I think that'd be a perfect time to do it. But yes, let me know your top 5 fights that you want to see in 2021 at least. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, of course, and we'll see you guys on the next video.